We are doing a live Q&A today with Mary Shomon, who is a thyroid and hormonal health coach and advocate. She's an advisor to Paloma Health. She's a New York Times bestselling author. Mary, you've written 15 books on thyroid health and hormone health. And you've been a long time player in this game. And so this is an Ask Me Anything with Mary Shomon, which is a really unique opportunity for you to ask any questions you want to Mary. There's a chat feature you'll see on the side of your screen there. You can start putting questions in there. We've got this set for 30 minutes, so we will get to as many questions as possible, and a replay will be available afterwards. So Mary, I'll hand it over to you. We've got the chat feature here, and I also know you have some questions that came in advance. So I'll let you take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. And this is a lot of fun because Katie and I are the regular co-hosts of our Paloma speaker series, where we get different experts, doctors, practitioners, healthcare providers, and we talk about a specific focused area. And our next one's coming up shortly, and it's talking about liver toxicity and toxins and the impact on your thyroid. But I love the idea today that it's an Ask Me Anything, because I am on Facebook all the time, and at the end of our speaker series chats, we always have so many individual questions and people have all sorts of issues. And so I even posted last week and said, I'm going to be doing this. If anybody have any questions that you want to get in, start thinking about some of the things that we had a lot of questions. We had over 100 questions. So I'm really excited to see some of you here. I recognize some of your names, and some of you have already submitted questions, and those are at the top of my list, just so you know. So let's go ahead and get started. And I am going to start with a question from one of our participants who's already online, Laura. And because Laura had posted this in our Paloma community, and I thought it was a really good question, and so I think it's a good one for us to start with. So Laura asked, I have Hashimoto's disease. I'm going gluten-free and DF, I'm assuming dairy-free, Laura. These past 6 months, I've seen a decrease in my TPO, my thyroid peroxidase antibodies. Past blood test, I saw a high increase in TPO. Besides taking the right supplements and exercise, what else can I be doing to reduce my TPO, as it's a mystery to their levels increasing? And should I get sex hormone testing and EBV, Epstein-Barr virus testing to rule out other issues? So this is a great question, Laura, and it's a question that a lot of people have, is why are my antibody levels going up and down? And it's helpful to think about a couple of different factors. So you did some really useful things, cutting out things that made your body go into an inflammatory state, which in your case it was gluten and dairy. And those are some of the guidelines that we have in the Paloma app and the dietary guidelines for the autoimmune protocol diet. But sometimes the antibodies are not necessarily going to only be responding just to your dietary inputs. One of the things that I've seen in many situations is antibodies will go up at times when you were exposed to other types of infections. So let's say you're a mom with little kids and they're coming home from school with every flu and cold and sniffles that are going around. You may see a bump in your antibodies because your immune system gets overactivated by exposure to other viruses and bacteria and various types of pathogens, and it starts to attack the thyroid. So you'll see an increase in those antibodies. It also may be that the period of post-vaccine, we have seen some people who've gotten COVID vaccines reported they had temporary bumps in their antibodies. Usually they resolve back to normal, but for a few weeks they had a bump. So it may be a period when you were either exposed to COVID or exposed to the vaccine, and that caused a temporary bump in your antibodies. It also can mean that there's another stealth infection going on in your body, and it, again, may not have anything to do with your food. So you may have gingivitis in your gums, or you may have a urinary tract infection or a respiratory infection or some other type of infection that's sort of bubbling below the level. That can also trigger your antibodies to go up. So one of the things that I would be looking at would be, number one, making sure that there's no infections or that there weren't any exposures to things that might have triggered that bump in your antibody levels. Number one. Number two, I would want to make sure that I'm taking a good supplement that supports my immune system and my thyroid in particular, and that would be one that would include selenium. So the Thyroid Daily Care supplement from Paloma is a great choice, or you may have another one that you prefer, but make sure you're getting the right amount of selenium, which is about 200 milligrams a day. And you also want to just take a look at your diet to make sure that there weren't any changes in it during that period, or that there aren't any stealth foods that might include dairy or something else that's aggravating your antibodies. So that would be a good starting point to start your exploration process. So, do we have anybody who's in the watching process? And I know I've got a bunch of advanced questions. Does anybody have a question they want to get now? Or if not, I'm going to go on to some of the questions that have already been submitted. And Katie, who is so helpful and is going to be providing lots of resources for you. She just gave us the daily thyroid care supplement link for those of you who might be interested in that. I take that every day, and I love it because it just covers everything. It keeps me from having to take 5 different supplements. So I take that on top of my general multivitamin, and I think that pretty much covers everything that I want to get, especially to support my thyroid. Okay, I'm going to go on to another question. And again, remember, the chat box, which is the little thought bubble down at the bottom of your page, click on that and you can enter your chat request or anything that you have to say. Let me just make sure here. Katie, how do people enter their information in the chat? So I'm looking, I can see the chat reading, but I can't see a place where I could like type something.
They should have. There should be a send button to the right at the bottom of the chat.
Okay. Type in the I may be incompetent. So there's a little box down at the bottom that's a little bit shaded, and it's where you type your information in and send. Suzanne just joined us. She said she's having issues with the sound. She can't hear me. Suzanne, is your computer microphone on? The little audio thing, you don't have an X over it. Double check that if you can.
And maybe someone else can let us know if they're also having issues hearing you or if they can hear you okay.
Yeah. Okay, so Nikki wants to know, supplements actually help your thyroid if it doesn't work? That's a good question, Nikki. The supplement is never going to replace the thyroid hormone that your body needs. So if you have Hashimoto's and your thyroid is activated in some way, partially your antibody ability functioning, there's no supplement that's going to replace the hormone that we absolutely need to survive. But what the supplements can do is help improve T4 to T2 conversion, help lower our antibodies in the case of selenium. It helps to do those things. It can help reduce inflammation. It can help support our hormonal balance, like in the case of vitamin D, for example. It can provide raw materials for thyroid hormone production, such as the case with iodine and tyrosine. So there are a lot of ways that supplements can come into the picture to support and improve thyroid function, but you have to have a thyroid that is actually producing something in order to do that, and you may, in many cases, have to be already supplementing with external thyroid hormone, as in a thyroid medication. But that doesn't mean that supplements aren't going to make your treatment better, more effective, and leave you feeling better. Okay, Mandy said she came back in and now it's working, so she's got the audio issues. Great, thank you. All right, Katie wants to know, does quercetin affect our thyroid medication? You know, that's a good question. I have taken quercetin at various points, but I've always taken it in a fairly normal, regular, daily recommended amount. I've not taken it in sort of megavitamin doses of megatherapy. So I don't know about large doses of quercetin. It's something that I want to look up and get back to you all about. So maybe we can include this on another call or another Ask Me Anything type of an event, and maybe we additional information if there's anything that I need to kind of put on the research burner. But I'm taking quercetin myself at times, especially during springtime when I'm having some allergies. I have never had a problem with it having an effect on my thyroid, but I want to research that further before we can give any sort of definitive opinion on it. Okay, I'm going to jump over to one of my many questions that I have from all the people that were going to try to make it or couldn't make it but wanted their question in. So we have Kimberly asked, she said, my GI doctor, she's taking a proton pump inhibitor drug for ulcers, irritable bowel, GERD, esophageal reflux, those types of things. I'm taking proton pump inhibitor and thyroid medicine. My GI doctor tells me that 1 hour after my thyroid medicine and an empty stomach is great. The endocrinologist says to take the proton pump inhibitor in the evening. So she's wondering when she should be taking her proton pump inhibitor, and can I take it anytime an hour after thyroid meds, or should I take it at night? And how is it going to affect my pH in my stomach, which affects the absorption of the thyroid medicine? So it's a really good question because there's a lot of people that are taking Prevacid and other types of proton pump inhibitors for ulcers and GERD and reflux. But here's the kicker. These drugs do real heavy interference with thyroid medicine. And so much so that most of the top gastroenterologists that I know, and many of the endocrinologists who are savvy about these types of GI issues, will tell you that it's best to bypass the tablet forms of levothyroxine entirely and go to the quercetin, which is the capsule form, but even better to go to the quercetin salt, which is the thyroxine form, because we tested it and it has the least amount of interference of the acids and iron. Really having on your absorption. So that said, I think Kimberly's endocrinologist would probably give her better advice than her endocrinologist. I think that the endocrinologist can far apart from her thyroid medication is probably a much better approach to it than taking it an hour after she's taken her medication to take the thyroid medicine. I would be erring on the side of caution and taking it as far apart as I can, but I would also be taking levothyroxine. I would be looking into quercetin salt form because it's going to have the least impact of absorption problems from the PPI drug on the thyroid. So that's my thoughts about it. Let's see. I'm going to take a look here at the questions. And this is a new platform for us, so we're just getting used to it and trying to figure out how it's all working. So we must be patient with it a little bit. Okay. So Laura Claggett wants to know if low-dose naltrexone works to lower TPO, thyroid peroxidase antibodies. If so, how long does it take to see results? Her Paloma doctor wants her to go on this. So low-dose naltrexone, for those of you who don't know, is a really unique treatment that is considered an off-label treatment. High-dose naltrexone is used as an opioid receptor blocker for people with addictions, whether it's drugs or alcohol addictions, used at 90, 100 milligrams a day, usually as part of a rehabilitation program for people that are in inpatient rehab for drugs and alcohol. But years ago, this really smart doctor, Bernard Bahari, discovered that his patients that were doing these therapies were actually going into remissions from their chronic because he was being able to end a high dose naltrexone that they were doing. How low can I go on a dose and still get that from so he down, and discovered that they could get up to 4.5 milligrams of naltrexone in a therapy that he called low-dose naltrexone, and they would get immune-enhancing benefits to the extent that in some cases antibodies were lowered or even reduced in normal range, which is considered a remission, and that in some cases people were able to lower their dose of autoimmune treatment medications or even go off of them completely. So the problem with low-dose naltrexone is, number one, you got to find a doctor that's willing to prescribe it. But as Laura found, some of our Paloma doctors are really on board and willing to work with patients on low-dose naltrexone. It's a generic drug. It's very inexpensive, so it's not a super pricey approach. The main thing with naltrexone, which is very few side effects at low doses, is if it's going to work or not. Because a subset of patients will find it doesn't do anything for them, but it doesn't cause any negative side effects and it's not expensive. So for many people with autoimmune disease, it's worth a try. Usually, most of the doctors that I know, and I know many of the Paloma doctors, would say you have to give it 3, 4, even sometimes 6 months to really see results. And of course, you definitely want to measure antibodies before and after so that you can see if there's any significant difference. But most people who do low dose naltrexone will tell you within 2 or 3 months they can tell physically that they feel better, and they can often see a reduction in their antibodies, reflecting the fact that their antibodies are dropping. And for those who didn't have any response or results, sometimes they'll go off of it and say, "Hey, it was a lesson learned, but it was worth a try in case it worked." And I would say more than half the people that I'm talking to who've done low dose naltrexone do find they have good results with it. Susie, and I'm so sorry you're still having trouble getting in and out, and I'm not sure what the sound problem is, but it doesn't seem like anyone else is having a problem, so it may not be with our broadcast, but it may be something about the platform on your system or something about your system. So hopefully if you can't be able to hear today, we'll definitely be having a replay for people that will be posting in various places and you'll be able to hear the sound. But thank you for being here. Okay, so Claire Rosa is on Euthrox medication for a month or so at 2 high dose. She has labs that were showing extremely high cholesterol. Have I come across this kind of problem before? Is that medication or diet or something else? You know, Claire, I don't know. That's a sort of a question that there's too many moving parts for us to know what's going on. Usually, when you're over-medicated on thyroid medication, it's going to make your cholesterol levels go down. So I'm not quite sure why yours would go up, but you suggest to me that it may either be something with your diet, something else entirely, or maybe something going on with your liver in terms of the medication. So I'm not sure. I think this is probably a question to work through with your doctor, and I am sorry, we're not going to be, I'm not a doctor, I'm really an educator here, so I can't really dive in to figure out exactly what's going on in your particular situation. But I can tell you, high cholesterol is usually associated with somebody being very hypo and under-medicated, not the opposite. Some people who are hyper have super low, almost unusually low cholesterol levels. All right, Julie, welcome. Julie said she's had her blood tested twice in the past 6 months. Both times showed high antibodies, but otherwise in range thyroid numbers. Should I be looking at where I am in the range? My PCP tried to refer me to an endocrinologist, but they said up to 20% of the population has antibodies, but my symptoms align with hypothyroidism. Do I actually have a thyroid problem? Should I push for another endo or see a Paloma doc? Assuming I can afford it or it's in there. Okay. A lot of good questions there, Julie, and your situation is extremely common. You have antibodies, but your thyroid levels are supposedly normal. Okay, well, let's keep in mind, there's a doctor I love, who's very famous, nationally known, internationally known expert on thyroid and fibromyalgia, according to Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum. He always says, look, if I take a group of 100 women and pull their shoe sizes, you're going to have shoe sizes ranging from 5.5 to 10. And so that's our reference range. That's our normal range, 5.5 to 10 for shoe sizes. But if I give a woman with a size 5.5 to size 10 shoe, it's going to be swimming under. Similarly, if I give the size 10 woman a size 5 shoe, she can't get her foot into it. So the reference range is just that. It's a reflection of a general range. It's not a hard and fast rule that says everybody in the range will feel great. the range, and free T4, free T3 are going to be on the upper end of the range. So we'll have enough thyroid hormone circulating, and that will be reflected with a lower TSH level. So that would be step number one: is what's your number? Where is that number? And is it consistent with even feeling well, based on the fact that you also have the antibodies and Hashimoto's? The other thing would be, yes, should you push for another practitioner consult? Yes, and honestly, I would suggest that you push for a Paloma doctor, primarily because Paloma doctors, unlike a lot of the conventional endocrinology world in general, are working with thyroid patients constantly every day as their primary focus. And so they understand that even slight variations within the TSH and some of the Hashimoto's may be the difference between feeling exhausted and symptomatic and feeling fine. The other thing is they also understand and recognize that there is some evidence that treating people who have symptoms, reference for your thyroid levels, but antibodies are not so these are doctors that don't need education. They're completely open to start, and it's not expensive. That's the thing. It's actually really affordable. And Paloma doctors are actually less than my co-pays for my doctor visit. So it's an extremely affordable option, and I would invite you to check it out. And see if you can get somebody to take this seriously, because it deserves to be taken seriously. Hashimoto's is a disease unto itself, and it can cause symptoms. Hypothyroidism is the end result of the disease. It's a separate condition. Taken together, they can create all sorts of havoc, and that's what we want to address, diagnose, treat, and deal with effectively. And that's honestly, that's what the focus is for Paloma, so I would recommend that you take a look at one of their doctors in your area. All right, so Suzanne says she has a question. After switching to a new compounding pharmacy, since my original pharmacy did not have a license in my state, I've been in the pharmacy for 3 months, love things are going well, but my hair is falling out. Is it stress, or could it be something with medicine? Actually, my thyroid levels are better than before. I consider them progressing. All right. So, if I'm understanding this correctly, Suzanne, your levels are better on this new compounded medication. Here's the thing: a lot of people are very sensitive to limits. Having a temporary, intelligent shedding hairs, shedding. Here's the case is actually considered a hair loss, even though it doesn't feel like it. If they actually measure and look at everything, it's actually considered to be normal level, but it may not be normal for you. You may be a 20 hair a person, 20 hair a day person, so it could be a higher for you, but generally it's not considered a dramatically heavy hair loss. But I know every hair that falls out feels like a lot to me, so I know. The other thing that I would look at is, yes, I would ask the new compounding pharmacy exactly what fillers, binders, etc. are you using in thyroid medication, and what's the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, and where are you sourcing T4 and T3 for your combination thyroid medication? Because in some cases, some of the APIs are very heavy on lactose or starch or acacia, other types of ingredients. Others are not. So I would start doing a little bit of detective work on what are the fillers that the compounders adding to the capsule, and what are the actual sourcing of the API, and where are they getting it from, so that we can kind of backtrack down to their ingredients. As far as your hair is concerned, I wouldn't worry, because the other thing is we also sometimes shed during the season, and hair is cyclical. We go through periods where it rests for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then it starts to grow again for a couple of months, and then it stop and stay kind of steady for a while, and it will shed again. So hair goes through this kind of an up and down pattern, and all for hair are at different time of the year. You may have just hit a incidental shedding period, or it could be related to my hair sheds, and I've gone through periods where it has gotten really, really bad. And some of you have followed me for a long time know that a couple years in at my thyroid diagnosis, I lost so much hair that I was down to a ponytail size of a pencil. Seriously, I had about this much hair in a ponytail. And I was just frantic. I didn't know what was going on. It took me about 2 years, but I got on the right optimal dose of T4T3. I also added a hair vitamin, and I added some collagen supplementation. And the combination of those things really, then I added ferritin. I added iron because my ferritin levels were not as strong as they needed to be. Once I got all those things in balance, my hair came back and it's going really fine. And so I don't have any problems with it now. But occasionally I go into a shed mode and I'll get out the hair vitamins and get back on it. Okay, let's see. Get some more questions. Thank you, Suzanne, for the question. All right. In regards to thyroid diets, what do you recommend? I know AIP and thyroid healing people come up very often, but are very restricted. Okay. Question. When it comes to thyroid diets, there's one size that fits all doesn't work. Some people will lose weight simply by just restricting calories. Like people find that they need to go to a very low carbohydrate.
Okay, Katie.
Other people have found intermittent fasting, and limited meals or limited window eating. Other people have found AIP, anti-inflammatory autoimmune type of an approach, is super helpful. There's so many different ways to go about it, and I can't say that there's any one that's better than another. That said, the autoimmune protocol is a good starting point because it tends to be a low inflammation diet, and for us, the sugar, the starchy carbohydrates, the junk food, that is inflammatory. That's part of the problem, why it aggravates our immune system and why it makes it harder to lose weight. So I would say an AIP approach is a good starting point. But if it's too restrictive for you, you can start out by adopting some of the principles of AIP, or even some very simple carbohydrate, restrictive Mediterranean diets. They all have healthy pros and benefits, and it really is a trial and error process for you to find out what the best approach is. And listen to your own body. That's something you can do. In addition to getting your baseline thyroid and making sure your thyroid is optimal, because it's almost impossible to weight if your thyroid is not where it needs to be. And you can also do something like gene palette, which assesses our DNA and tells us which nutrients you need to focus on. Are you a protein person? Are you a carb person? Do you need a higher level of fat than other people? Go through it, gives you a huge detailed report. If you have a 23andMe, you can send it into them and they'll send you back a report for like $30. If you have never had a DNA test, you can order the whole thing from them. I think it's less than $100 and you get the whole report and this amazing information that can really help you understand nutritionally what to do going forward. Okay, let's see. Can starch and rice be a problem for thyroid patients from Cathy Vermont? It depends, Cathy. It depends on if somebody is sensitive to starch and sugars and rice. If they are somebody who's trying to lose weight, if these substances are aggravating to them. I mean, there are people that are allergic to rice. These are certain starches, cellulose, for example, those types of things. It really depends. There's no, this is like, I've heard from some, one of my favorite nutritionists, Johnny Bogle, said there's no bad food. There's just too much of it or, not preparing it properly. So there's nothing wrong with starch and rice unless you have major medical reasons to have to avoid them completely because there are some people who can't metabolize certain things. But for most of us, most foods are okay. It's just how are we preparing them? What's the quality of the food? Is it laden with pesticides and covered in junk and grown in the wrong places? are we eating it in an appropriate quantity? And that even goes for things that are supposedly healthy, like soy. A little bit of soy is fine. Some people say, oh, if a little is good, then a whole lot must be better. And then they get into the quantities of foods that can turn a food to actually a medication. And sometimes that can backfire. We don't want to overdo soy. We don't want to overdo the raw, eugenic, cruciferous vegetables. We want to be moderate with some of these things because they can have negative effects on hormones and thyroid when overeaten or not prepared properly. Okay, let's see. I think we'll take one or two more questions off the list, and then we're probably going to wrap it up because I think our initial plan was to go for about 30 minutes today, right, Katie? And let's see. All right. Here's a couple very simple questions, but people ask them, and they're a really important answer. Susan wants to know, can your thyroid grow back after removal? And it's an interesting question. So the thyroid can't grow back. It's not like we're going to regenerate a new thyroid, although I wish we could. I mean, everybody wishes we could. But what can happen? You've had your thyroid removed, whether you had thyroid cancer, you had surgery, or you had Graves' disease, or a goiter, or nodules that you had your thyroid gland removed. They, in some cases, there'll be little bits of tissue of the thyroid left behind. Well, if you don't have cancer, like you had a nodule or something, this is not a problem. When you have thyroid cancer, however, those little bits can actually become activated and become cancerous again, which is part of the reason why thyroid cancer patients, they really want to make sure they've taken care of all thyroid tissue. So remaining bits of thyroid tissue can actually grow in size, not regenerate a full functioning thyroid, but they can grow and they can produce thyroid hormone. So it's kind of an interesting concept. We have another question. If somebody wants to know, can you transplant thyroids? And right now, they are doing animal tests. I know they have transplanted rabbit thyroids. I saw some studies recently about rabbits. We are probably not that far down the road from thyroid transplants. And I've actually seen that they can transplant parathyroid, which is the gland that's behind the thyroid. And they actually put it in your arm so that it can produce certain amount of calcium when they need to. I think we're close to it, but it's not something that I'm going to count on in the next 5 to 10 years being common therapy. But I think they're on their way to that. So thyroids aren't growing back, but they can leave pieces behind that increase thyroid hormone, and we probably are looking at some development of transplantation down the road. All right, let me see if I can pull one more question off the list. Let's see. You see advances soon. This is from Kim. Advances to be able to check thyroid levels at home, like blood sugar. This is a really good question because there's sort of two different answers. Right now, we already have the ability to check thyroid levels at home. And Katie's going to give you a link in our chat box to the Paloma test kit. So you can order your Paloma test kit, and actually I think our on today that Katie's going to put in information dollars off of our price on our thyroid test kit. So it's an amazing value of $16. PSH, free keyboard, and thyroid advertising. And you can actually upgrade with checking it out and get vitamin D every first week. That's one option that we have to test at home. Current test kit from Paloma. The kit comes in. Do it. Takes a couple minutes to just prick yourself, put your blood on the card, put it in the mail, send it back in, and days after it gets there, you've got results. I think it's an amazing process. But I think what Kim was asking about was probably more like, can I prick my finger or stick my finger in and have it say, your TSH is X or T4 is Y. What they have right now, Kim, is more like there are actually rapid TSH tests that are available. Sometimes at health fairs, they'll have them out there. What they can do is they can prick your blood, within a few minutes, it's like a pregnancy test or like a COVID home rapid test or whatever. In about 10 to 15 minutes, it's going to give you sort of an up or down. Are you hypo or are you not? It's not going to give you a either number like a glucose meter would give us, where test your blood sugar and tell you your blood sugar is 92. We haven't gotten quite there yet. Does the technology exist to be able to do it? Probably. But is it something that they've been able to mass market and make affordable for the average person? No. But I would bet somebody's out there working on it. But we don't have it right now. But the next best thing, in my opinion, is a Paloma home test kit. You can get everything you want to 10 tests as basics, TSH, 54, 53, and TPO antibodies, and again, vitamin D and first free as they add on if you want them. And you don't have to leave your house. You just get it by mail it back in. So convenient, especially with COVID and everything else going on. Not all of us want to be standing in lines or sitting in busy labs or having to try and drive all over the place to get our lab work done. It makes it so much simpler. And these are certified scientific labs. This is not anything different than what typical tests go through. So it's very, very reliable results. Cathy says, thank you. Okay, great, Cathy. I'm really glad that you were able to join us, and I'm really excited about your being part of this. So I have one last question. I think it's a good one to end on. And one of our readers, our viewers, wanted to know, why aren't doctors taking thyroid? Seriously, that's probably a really appropriate question, because this is Thyroid Awareness Month in January, and patients get really fired up about it. And I don't know that the doctors do as much. But why do people not take it seriously? And it's a good question, and I wish that I had an answer. I have some theories. I think it's partly because it's a female-dominated condition. Many more women, 8 times to 10 times more women than men are affected. I also think it's because the symptoms are often attributed to emotional rather than physical problems. So if you're tired, depressed, foggy brained, you're feeling down, you're sleepy, these can all be symptoms of depression or PMS or menopause or postpartum. And so it's just, again, it's sort of shuffled off to be emotional symptoms rather than a physical condition that causes all of these symptoms. So I think to some extent, I think there's a certain element of the fact that women are most often affected by it. It doesn't get taken as seriously. Honestly, I think, maybe I'm going to sound like a feminist, but if men were hypothyroid at the numbers that women were, we would have clinics all over the country, and there would be hypothyroidism programs on television and everything else. But good news is we've really been making a lot of advances in the last 15 to 20 years on awareness. Patients being able to get information and advocate for themselves has been an incredible power and has improved dramatically the amount of thyroid care. 20 years ago, most doctors would not use T3. Most doctors would not use naturally desiccated thyroid drugs. And surveys have shown that those numbers have increasingly gone up and up and up until I think it's about half the doctors now are willing to prescribe a T3 in addition to a T4, and increasing numbers are willing to work with natural thyroid drugs because the patients are saying this is what we want. So part of it is our responsibility to keep advocating for what we need. I want doctors to be more aware, and it's also really exciting because we now have practices like Paloma, and Paloma is a hypothyroidism dedicated medical practice. I mean, you could not get more than what you want from that concept. Going into a medical practice in a virtual environment where everybody understands exactly what you're going through. You know all the medications. You don't have to educate them, convince them, and convert them to your way of thinking. They already know, and they get it. So that's a new development. I mean, when I first heard about Paloma, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been wishing they had forever. A dedicated practice focusing just on people with hypothyroidism. So Katie's going to put a just main link up to the page for us. I'm saying palomahealth.com. And so if you're, those of you who are in here watching today, you already know about Paloma, but in case other people are getting a chance to see the video, I just want to make sure that they know, which is why I am so excited to do these things, because I really believe in this concept, and I think that it's really wonderful. There's a lot of doctors that can do a wonderful job with thyroid out there, but this is almost a guarantee that you're going to hit it right out of the park from the start when you work with a doctor, because there's no separating the guys who know and the women who know what they're doing from the others. They're all in it because they know. So I think we're going to wrap it up, because I've been talking over the 30 minutes and I still have like a gazillion questions left. And I think what I'm going to try to do is tackle some of these, and maybe we'll put out a special issue news release or newsletter, or maybe we'll do another one of these soon. Katie, I don't know. What do you think? How are we going to tackle all these extra questions that I've got from people that want to know what's going on?
Sure. Well, I don't want to sign you up for anything that you haven't committed to yet, but it would be great to do these regularly. Obviously, you got a lot of questions and we got a lot in the chat, so it'd be nice to do more of these. Ask me anything or office hours with Mary Shomon moving forward. So we'll definitely figure out how to get all the questions answered.
Yeah, I would love to do that, because people take the time to ask the questions. I want to make sure that they get the answers and the information that they want. And for those of you who maybe haven't explored the full Paloma site, I also encourage you to go check out the blog and the articles, because I'm just one of a whole group of people who are contributing some incredibly wonderful blog posts, articles, informational things. I mean, I go in there and I share a couple things every month, but I go in there and I see, oh my gosh, look at this! I find all these amazing articles. But there's so many different ways to connect with the community. Experts and find out. There's our speaker series, there's events like this, and then of course there are connecting with the actual providers and things. So ideally we're trying to just kind of get everybody in a big hug and make us all feel well. So
that's our goal. We're trying to make it easy for people to take back control of their thyroid health and have everything they need in one space. So Mary, thank you so much for your time and for answering all these questions. And thank you to everyone who joined us live. Suzanne and anyone else who is having a hard time with volume, we will send out a replay. It'll be available here in the community. It'll also be available on our website. So you will get the answers and you can hear this whole Q&A with Mary by the end of the week. So again, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.